Right now, your brain is probably rehearsing a conversation you are completely never going to have.
Oh, absolutely.
Right, just to solve a problem that honestly doesn't actually exist in the real world. And we typically classify that background hum as, like planning or thinking ahead.
Yeah, we call it being prepared.
Exactly. But the material we are diving into today argues something entirely different. It says that this is actually a massive, massive leak in your personal power.
It's just a really profound miscategorization of what the mind is actually doing. I mean, we operate under this modern assumption that building a meaningful life or achieving any kind of real strength
Right.
requires constant, visible output.
Right, like we have to show everybody what we're doing.
Exactly. We announce our goals, we broadcast our intentions online, and we sort of equate a racing mind with a productive one.
Which brings us to the actual stack of sources we are pulling from today. So we are looking at this really fascinating intersection of texts. We've got direct translations of classical Stoic philosophy, specifically the writings of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca.
Some heavy hitters.
Yeah, the classics. And we're cross-referencing those with contemporary cognitive psychology papers on executive function and mental load.
Which is such a cool pairing, honestly.
It really is. And the unified mission of these sources, and our mission for you listening to this deep dive today, is to basically cut through the modern plague of mental noise. The core premise we found is brutal, but I think it's necessary.
Yeah, laid out.
So it's this: nobody ever changed their life by talking about changing it, and nobody ever built something real by just thinking about building it.
That is, I mean, it forces a complete reevaluation of what strength actually looks like.
Yeah.
The visual backdrop I have up today, I'm looking at this austere, minimalist room with a Roman bust, and it really reflects the architectural depth of this concept.
Yeah, it sets the mood for sure.
Right. The Stoic material asserts that true, enduring strength is built in complete, unglamorous silence. Performing the appearance of strength is where most people hemorrhage the exact energy that they require to actually produce results.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how to reclaim that energy, the cognitive research in our sources suggests we have to look at the actual mechanics of the mind.
Right. What's going on under the hood?
Exactly. There is this rigid distinction drawn here between mental noise and genuine thinking. And from an evolutionary biology standpoint, our brains are actually wired to confuse the two.
Yeah. The confusion is basically a survival mechanism gone into complete overdrive. Your prefrontal cortex is designed to simulate threats so you can avoid them.
Like running from a tiger.
Exactly. In a prehistoric environment, simulating a tiger attack kept you alive. But today, the brain applies that exact same intense biological machinery to simulating an awkward email exchange.
Oh man, guilty.
Right. Or replaying some minor social slight from 3 days ago. It triggers the exact same physical stress response, but without any physical resolution.
That explains why it feels so physically exhausting. I mean, the modern analogy that comes to mind isn't really a car idling in neutral. It's more like a computer's RAM being entirely consumed by background applications.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like you open your laptop to write a document, which is the actual task, but the whole system freezes because 90% of the memory is being hoarded by 20 different browser tabs that are just constantly auto-refreshing in the background.
Just draining the battery.
Exactly. The machine is working incredibly hard. It's generating a ton of heat, but the actual output is literally zero. But how do we practically hit the brakes on a mind that has been revving in neutral for years?
So your analogy maps perfectly onto the Stoic definition of mental noise.
Yeah.
Because genuine thinking is a closed loop, it's purposeful, it's directed at a specific problem, and it terminates when a decision or clarity or a tangible next step is reached.
Right. It actually goes somewhere.
Yes. Mental noise, on the other hand, is an open infinite loop. It is just the rehashing of the unchangeable past and the hallucination of an uncontrollable future.
Which brings in this really critical quote from Marcus Aurelius that we found in the text. He says, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength."
A classic one.
It is. And the psychological analysis accompanying this quote points out that Aurelius isn't advocating for the power to think more forcefully. He's identifying the executive function required to deliberately close those background tabs.
Right. He is talking about metacognition, which is just the ability to think about what you are thinking about. Because the cognitive cost of mental noise isn't just fatigue, it is the total obliteration of insight.
Wait, really? The obliteration?
Yeah, because complex problem solving requires a low cognitive load. Insights don't arrive in a noisy mind. If your internal RAM is totally maxed out with noise, the subtle creative connections that form real insights simply cannot process. They literally require a quieted neural environment to surface.
Wow. And the prescribed first step in the source material for fixing this is surprisingly minimalist. It's simply noticing. But I mean, how does mere observation function as a biological brake pedal?
So noticing shifts the brain's activity from the default mode network, which is
Mhm.
the part that handles that wandering, ruminative noise, over to the central executive network.
Okay, shifting gears.
Exactly. The moment you simply observe, oh, I am cycling through this worry again without generating a solution, you create this micro distance between your identity and the thought. You are no longer the noise.
You are the observer of the noise.
Right. From that vantage point, a conscious redirection actually becomes possible.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though.
Mm.
If this background noise is so agonizing and it drains our cognitive batteries so badly, why does the human brain violently resist shutting it off?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. The psychology papers in our stack point to a very uncomfortable reality. This noise, particularly when it takes the form of chronic overthinking, is actually a highly sophisticated defense mechanism.
It is fear disguised as diligent preparation. Overthinking masquerades as maturity. We tell ourselves we are just being thorough, right? We're mapping out every contingency and acting responsibly before taking a risk.
It's totally a way to protect the ego. As long as a project or a career move or a difficult conversation remains entirely in the planning phase inside your head, it exists in a state of absolute perfection.
It hasn't encountered the friction of reality yet.
Exactly. It hasn't failed yet. And most importantly, your identity as this highly capable person who is eventually going to execute this brilliant plan remains completely safe from judgment.
Because the illusion of predictability is comforting. The Stoics recognize this paralysis perfectly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not waste the rest of your time here worrying about other people. It will keep you from doing anything useful."
So the worrying is basically a proxy for action.
Yeah, it creates the sensation of movement without the vulnerability of actual exposure.
Okay, but I have to push back on the Stoic cure for this, though. The text argues that the antidote to overthinking is an imperfect beginning, basically just starting before you are ready.
Right.
But in a modern, hyper-competitive corporate environment, an imperfect beginning can get you fired. If you launch a flawed product or present an undercooked financial model, the market doesn't reward your bravery. How does this philosophy survive a world that demands flawless execution?
That is a fair pushback, and it's a critical distinction to make. But we have to separate recklessness from what's called epistemic uncertainty. The Stoics aren't advocating for negligence.
Okay.
They are pointing out the mathematical impossibility of modeling complex reality entirely inside your head. In a corporate environment, yes, you absolutely do your due diligence. But chronic overthinking attempts to eliminate all uncertainty before acting.
Which is impossible.
Exactly. The cure for overthinking isn't more thinking to find certainty, because certainty just doesn't exist before action. An imperfect beginning, like a beta test or a prototype or just a preliminary conversation that generates actual data.
So reality provides the friction that thought cannot simulate.
Precisely. You might discover that the client doesn't actually care at all about the feature you spent 3 weeks agonizing over, but they are deeply concerned about a supply chain issue you hadn't even considered.
You only extract that data through contact with the real world.
Exactly. A perfect mental model yields no actionable data because it operates in a total vacuum. The person who initiates an imperfect beginning and iterates based on real-world feedback is always going to outpace the person trying to build a perfect simulation in their mind.
That makes a lot of sense. And the sources then track how this internal leakage of energy inevitably bleeds outward.
Right, moving from the inside to the outside.
Yeah. When the internal pressure of all that mental noise gets too high, it seeks an exhaust valve. And it usually finds it in our interactions with other people, which manifests as over-talking.
Because we culturally treat speech as a neutral, frictionless activity, we just assume words are free. But the texts view speech through a lens of strict biological and social economics.
Words are not neutral.
Not at all. Generating speech requires a massive caloric and neurological expenditure. It requires attention, physical presence, and the cognitive load of constantly monitoring the listener's reaction.
The economics of speech presented in the psychological analysis is fascinating. It applies the basic laws of supply and demand to our vocabulary.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
It is. If you are a constant talker, filling every silence, reacting out loud to every minor inconvenience, you drive the market value of your words to zero. You teach your environment that your speech is abundant, it's reflexive, and therefore it's cheap.
You basically become auditory background noise.
Yeah.
People adapt to you the exact same way they adapt to a humming refrigerator.
They just tune it out.
Exactly. They stop consciously registering the sound. Conversely, the individual who practices verbal restraint manipulates the supply. When they do choose to speak, it acts as an anomaly in their environment. It commands attention because the scarcity of their words implies a high density of thought behind them.
There is a famous directive from the Stoic philosopher Epictetus included here. He said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak."
I love that one.
Me too. And what struck me in the modern analysis of this quote is that it isn't treated as just a quaint metaphor for politeness. It's analyzed as a literal design specification for information gathering.
Yeah, it is the architecture of an apex learner. Epictetus followed that up with another ruthless observation. He said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows."
Ouch.
Right. When you are speaking, you are simply broadcasting your existing data set. You are writing over the environment rather than reading it. You are literally incapable of acquiring new information while your vocal cords are engaged.
The cognitive psychology papers break this down by distinguishing between genuine active listening and what they term strategic waiting.
Oh, this is a huge distinction.
Yeah, because when most people appear to be listening, their central executive network isn't actually processing the other person's words. They are merely tracking the rhythm of the speech to predict a pause.
It's waiting for their turn.
Exactly. So they can insert the anecdote or the opinion that they loaded into their working memory like 3 minutes ago.
And the competitive disadvantage of strategic waiting is massive. The person who engages in genuine, silent listening possesses total information asymmetry in any room.
Because they're actually gathering new data.
Exactly. Because they are not burdened by the cognitive load of formulating their next sentence, they can detect the microexpressions, the subtle hesitations, and the actual emotional drivers beneath the conversation.
They see the entire board.
Right. While the constant talker operates completely blind, navigating based only on the echoes of their own assumptions.
This forces us to look at our own daily habits. Think about the last week. How many unprompted opinions did you offer? How many times did you insert commentary simply to prove you understood a concept, or react out loud when you could have just nodded and processed it internally?
It's confronting for sure.
It is. Resisting the urge to broadcast every passing thought and not filling empty space with words, it reclaims an immense amount of bandwidth. It's almost like a superpower.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of the source material. What do we do with this reclaimed bandwidth? We've closed the background tabs of mental noise. We've stopped bleeding energy through unnecessary speech. We have engineered a surplus of focus and silence.
So what's next?
The Stoic imperative is that this surplus must be used to build.
And building requires depth. The texts draw a really sharp contrast between modern busyness and actual focus. Busyness feels like progress, but it lacks depth. It's frantic and visible.
Yeah, it's switching between 6 tasks, answering emails while on a conference call, and just feeling totally exhausted by 5 p.m. without having moved the needle on anything substantial.
Right. Because focus is not a productivity technique or some to-do list hack. Focus is the structural engineering of character and achievement. The sources emphasize what they call the hours nobody sees.
That's where the real work happens.
Exactly. The person you are becoming is built in these protracted, unglamorous blocks of time where you are entirely offline. There's no audience. You are pushing through the friction of a difficult task past the exact moment your brain begs for the dopamine hit of a distraction.
The philosopher Seneca captured the danger of the scattered mind perfectly. He wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." And then he offered the countermeasure, "Begin at once to live and count each separate day as a separate life."
So, what does this all mean? The analogy of compounding interest comes to mind. Focus is like compounding interest for your character. You aren't just getting slightly better, you are becoming a fundamentally different person.
And the structural engineering analogy holds up well here too. You cannot build a skyscraper on shifting sands. When you fracture your attention across a dozen inputs, your foundation is inherently unstable.
But you're spread too thin.
Yeah. You offer fragmented presence to your professional work and fragmented presence to your family, yielding predictably shallow results in both domains. Deep work, sustained by the silence we've been discussing, drives the pylons down to bedrock.
The source material suggests a highly specific, practical stress test for you to try. Block out just 20 minutes. One single task. Total attention, total isolation from external competing input. So no phone, no additional monitors, no background podcast.
Just you and the task.
Right. The objective is to observe the visceral, almost painful withdrawal symptoms your brain experiences when it's denied its usual diet of shallow stimuli, and then to measure the disproportionately high quality of the work you produce in that short window.
And the broader historical context is vital here, too. Silence in the Stoic tradition isn't merely an empty room or the absence of acoustic noise. It is an impenetrable inner state.
Right, it's internal.
Yes. Marcus Aurelius was not a monk living in an isolated cave. He was the emperor of Rome, commanding legions, managing wars and plagues, and navigating constant political treachery. Yet, amidst that absolute chaos, he wrote, "Never be in a hurry, do everything quietly and in a calm spirit."
The cognitive load of running an empire would be unimaginable, yet his fundamental operating principle was internal quiet. He didn't say do everything efficiently or aggressively. He specifically said doing it quietly.
Because he recognized that external chaos is inevitable, but internal chaos is a choice. He fiercely protected his inner silence because he understood that his best leadership came from there.
The quality of his decisions was tied to that silence.
Entirely. His strategic decisions and his emotional regulation were completely downstream from the quality of his internal state. A reactive, noisy mind produces erratic, fragile leadership. A quieted mind absorbs the shockwaves of reality and responds with deliberate force.
Synthesizing all of this, the texts and the psychology, the core transformation we've been examining is a total inversion of modern values. The most formidable, powerful version of you is not the loudest, most visible iteration. It is the most focused.
Absolutely.
True strength doesn't need to introduce itself. It exerts gravity it is felt in a room before a single word is spoken. You construct this strength systematically by thinking less to reduce mental noise, by talking less to eliminate performance, and by deploying that reclaimed energy into deep, sustained focus.
And the pragmatism of this philosophy is its best feature. You don't need a retreat to the mountains to initiate this. You can start building this strength in the very next quiet hour available to you, which might literally be right now.
Just close the background tabs.
Exactly. It simply requires the decision to observe the noise and apply genuine attention to the reality immediately in front of you.
It anchors perfectly back to where we began. You don't alter the trajectory of your life by broadcasting our intentions. You alter it through the quiet, compounding mechanics of focused action. But I want to leave you with our final thought to ponder as you step back into your day, building on the Stoic idea of internal control amidst external chaos.
Let's hear it.
If our neurological systems and philosophical frameworks were explicitly designed to require this quiet, focused strength and, 2 ears, 1 mouth, a biological mandate for internal silence to process complex reality, what does it say about the modern digital infrastructure we currently inhabit?
Oh, that's a heavy question.
We live in an ecosystem algorithmically optimized to demand the broadcast of every passing thought, to force instant reactions to every notification, and to monetize our mental noise. Are we existing in an environment that is purposefully designed to extract our strength? And if that is the case, isn't reclaiming your silence the ultimate act of rebellion?